Everyone. I'm very excited to be here with you guys tonight. Thank you all so much for joining me. I have a really kind of interesting off topic to talk about tonight because I know most people are talking about Brittany Griner, and I would rather not, because as far as I'm concerned, the way the Biden administration is using DEI to bring prisoners back is just gross, despicable, heinous, ridiculous. I hate it very much. Definitely other people deserved more of a focus, and especially in exchange for somebody who was called, what was he called? The something of something of death, the harbinger of death or something. I think there was a Nicolas Cage movie about the guy they traded for Brittany Griner, and instead of bringing a Marine back, we brought an intersectional black lesbian WNBA player back, and I find that gross, and that is not the America that I want to see moving forward, but here we are. So I'm not going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about something much more exciting, because this is actually pretty big news that Scott Adams has kind of touched on in the past, and I didn't quite believe him when he said how much people hated ESG, but I am starting to now after the little bit of research I just did for this video. We are going to look at all of that stuff together, but we're going to start with an Elon Musk tweet because I thought this was hilarious. So Adam Schiff said on Elon Musk's Twitter, slurs against black people have tripled. Slurs against women are up 33%. Slurs against Jewish people are up 61%, and slurs against gay men are up 58%. These numbers are abysmal and unacceptable. Today, Rep. Mark Takana and I are demanding action. Good for Adam. He's being ratioed gloriously. There are 41,000 comments on this and 10,000 retweets. That's insane. And Elon Musk responded and said false. Hate speech impressions are actually down by 1/3 for Twitter now versus prior to acquisition. And he goes at community notes. I don't know what community notes is. Let's find out together. Oh, interesting. Oh, it's like statistics about Twitter. How fascinating. I'm going to have to follow them just to keep an eye on what's going on over at Twitter. Anyway, I thought that was a hilarious and fantastic exchange. I also wanted to point you guys toward this. My comment on this picture, Nancy Pelosi and her press corps. I said the awful oppression is in full swing. Awful stands for affluent white female liberal. And somebody commented, another example of not practicing what you preach. Okay, Super Chief, let's talk about why this is in no way hypocritical. I said, what? Not to judge people on things they can't change, because this is something I do recommend, not judging people on things they can't change. I said, perhaps condescendingly, but I don't walk it back, especially not on Twitter. Sweetheart, these women could be honest with themselves anytime they liked. That's something they can change. Until they are awfuls, and I will refer to them as such because their demographic leans this way. Awfuls tend to vote Democratic, and this is part of the reason that I think the 19th Amendment should be revised, perhaps not repealed outright. I will couch that in slightly more empathetic terms, but I think we need to examine the role that women play in the political landscape in a way that we haven't before. So anyway, that's just the opening notes. Why I really want to get into this ESG stuff, so let's effing go. So here I have this article about states pushing back against ESG policies, and this is really interesting. So I noticed during the course of this research that the New York Times is coming out against ESG, as is the Harvard Business Review. And I was like, you know what? If you can't even keep the praise of the New York Times, who are supposed to be singing all sorts of high praise for you and your actions with ESG, I don't know how you're gonna succeed. But let's read this article. So let's see what we learned together. States push back against ESG policies. As energy prices continue to soar with no reprieve in sight, the continued fallout from environmental, social, and governance principles isn't stopping anytime soon. That's what ESG stands for, just for the record. While the American public is slowly seeing these values for what they indeed are, empty platitudes and virtue signaling, the Biden administration continues to double down on ESG across government agencies. However, there is an opening for states, cherished laboratories of democracy, to help rein in the abuse stemming from these confusing, unenforceable, and in some instances unauthorized principles. 3 states can serve as examples here. This is a perfect summary article. I love a good summary article. Saves a lot of time. Most prominently, fossil fuel-rich West Virginia is aggressively against financial institutions targeting coal, oil, and gas companies. The mountain state accounts for 13% of total U.S. coal production, while the oil and gas industry employs 82,000 people, or 9.2% of the workforce, and generates $11.2 billion in the state's gross domestic product. Wow, that's impressive. In January, lawmakers passed a bill to discharge the state treasurer to publish a list of financial institutions engaged in boycotts of energy companies. The result of this is its restricted financial institution list. Listed financial institutions include BlackRock Inc., Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, US Bancorp, and Wells Fargo. So the list of everyone you don't like is literally the list of these people who are boycotting these energy companies in West Virginia. If companies prove they aren't engaging in energy company boycotts anymore, the state treasurer will promptly remove them from the list. Not sure what that list entails. I would like to learn more about it. Like West Virginia, oil and gas-rich Texas has similarly hit investment firms for targeting these critically important industries. The oil and gas industry plays an integral role there, representing 35% of the state's economy. The Lone Star State warned if they engage in discriminatory practices against lawful energy companies, including the denial of loans, they would be ineligible to participate in their state pension fund, and the state delivered on the promise. Good for Texas. Seriously, good for Texas. This is how you make positive social change. This is cultural enforcement through the avenue of state elected officials making these calls. And this is exactly how it should be, 100%. Betting against Texas was more costly than ESG investments themselves, so much so that in February of this year, BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, decided it wouldn't boycott fossil fuel companies and instead recommitted to backing related investments again. We will continue to invest in and support fossil fuel companies, including Texas fossil fuel companies, the February 2022 memo read. Ha, 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 ha. That is a win for Texas. The Texas case study shows these companies ultimately care about their business model and not satisfying the whims of a few activist shareholders. This is a biased article, but I don't mind because they put it all in a good summary form. Similarly, Idaho is leading the charge to fight S&P Global's global usage of ESG metrics, including its recent ESG credit indicator report card, U.S. states and territories, to determine state credit ratings. As State Treasurer Julia Ellsworth rightfully argues, the new ratings undermine creditworthiness on partisan grounds. A letter from the Idaho delegation calling on S&P Global for its biased credit rating system because it falsely represented its ratings as objective, writing in 2015, S&P admitted to falsely representing that its ratings were objective, independent, and uninfluenced by S&P's business relationship with the investment banks that issued securities covered by S&P. The rating agency paid a hefty settlement amounting to $1.375 billion, including millions to the Gem State, for defrauding investors in residential mortgage-backed securities and collateralizing debt obligations. I don't know what those words mean, but I am glad that they were forced to pay a huge bill for lying about whether they were unbiased. West Virginia, Texas, and Idaho aren't the only states fighting ESG. More Republican-led states are joining the battle because it's proving to be a winning issue for protecting pensioners, retirees, and the broader economy from so-called sustainable investing that isn't as lucrative as advertised. Harvard Business Review, and this is what I was mentioning earlier, notes, to begin with, ESG funds certainly perform poorly in financial terms, although the highest-rated funds in terms of sustainability certainly attracted more capital than the lowest-rated funds. None of the high sustainability funds outperformed any of the lowest-rated funds. It's not only American states that are reconsidering ESG principles and the associated policies. Even Germany realizes the shortcomings of divesting from fossil fuels after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It urged the group of 7 nations to reconsider commitments to stop overseas fossil fuel projects by 2022. A draft text of the reversal reportedly concedes that publicly supported investment in the gas sector is necessary as a temporary response to the current energy crisis. Even BlackRock CEO Even BlackRock CEO Larry Fink cautioned against businesses like his becoming, quote, the climate police. Interesting, and we will talk about Larry Fink more in a minute. Thus far, 15 state treasurers have urged the administration to stop bending the free market to undermine lawful energy companies, and more are expected to join the fight. ESG proponents will be on the losing side of history as U.S. states and the private sector recognize our continued dependence on affordable, safe, clean fossil fuels is more attractive than not. So this is clearly a very biased, almost an opinion piece. Thank you, Gabriella, for putting this all together for us, but it's definitely opinion. Oh, good. Okay, it's rated as an opinion from Inside Sources. Great article. We're going to hop over to BlackRock CEO Larry Fink. Actually, you know what? Let me not jump ahead. Here, let's stay here. West Virginia and Texas bar financial firms over deemed fossil fuel boycotts. You know, that article was so good. I don't even think we need to read this one because they included all of that stuff. I really wanted to talk about Florida, though, because Florida has made the biggest hit against this ESG stuff thus far. Florida pulls $2 billion from BlackRock in the largest anti-ESG divestment. Florida's chief financial officer said Thursday his department would pull $2 billion worth of its assets managed by BlackRock Inc., the biggest such divestments by a state opposed to the asset manager's environmental, social, and corporate governance (ESG) policies. While the move will hardly dent BlackRock's $8 trillion in assets, holy cow, it underscores how the backlash among many Republican politicians, such as those in Florida, against ESG investing, which they see as promoting a woke agenda, is gathering steam. I'm going to skip to the bottom of this one. It says, so far, only Republican-controlled states have made major reallocations away from BlackRock, including $794 million pulled by Louisiana's treasurer and $500 million by Missouri's treasurer, both in October. Early this week, Republican attorneys general from various states asked a federal regulator to limit Vanguard Group's Inc.'s activities over ESG concerns and asked United Parcel Service Inc. and FedEx Corp. to clarify their policies on tracking firearm shipments. Wow, good for them. I am happy to see that. So let's see what's going on with BlackRock. A couple different things are happening here. Oh no, go away. Oh, I don't want to have to unlock this. You know what? I'm going to run over to... let me see if I can find a different source for this. Sorry, guys, I didn't realize you had to unlock that. BlackRock. I don't know how to spell subpoena. There we go. Thank you, Google. All right, we're going to use Fox News, even though they don't like us to have an ad blocker. I don't care about that. Kick rocks. Oh, no, go away. I don't want this. Anyway, Texas is subpoenaing BlackRock for documents related to their ESG push. Texas lawmaker tells Fox Business the state will not allow financial institutions to continue to use Texas monies to force a narrow political agenda. I think that's fully fair. Good for Texas, but we've already discussed Texas a bit. Let's look at what's going on in the companies themselves. Here we have BlackRock. Their CEO, Larry Fink, is being pushed to exit over ESG hypocrisy by Lydia Moynihan. What a great name, Lydia. Thank you for not being a feminist. I've noticed many Lydias are feminists. A small activist fund fired a slingshot at Goliath investment firm BlackRock, calling for the ouster of CEO Larry Fink for his hypocrisy in pushing a woke political agenda. Lydia, you need a better copy editor. Calling for the ousting of CEO Larry Fink. Bluebell Capital, a London-based firm with just $250 million in assets under management compared to the roughly $8 trillion BlackRock oversees, accused Fink of not adhering to his espoused environmental, social, and governance ESG principles. We see BlackRock endorsing a number of bad practices from a governance, social, and environmental perspective, which is not actually in tune with what they say. That is very interesting. Let me say that when the price of coal was around $76 per ton, BlackRock was talking about essentially divesting, said Bluebell co-founder Giuseppe Bivona in an interview with CNBC. Now that the price of coal is $380 per ton, they are talking about responsible ownership. I think there's a high correlation between BlackRock's strategy on coal and the price of coal. BlackRock, of course, brushed off the accusations. In the past 18 months, Bluebell has waged a number of campaigns to promote their climate and governance agenda. That's interesting. So Bluebell is actually on the side of ESG, but they're trying to call out BlackRock over hypocrisy with what Larry Fink is doing. I don't care. I'm delighted to see the civil war between the firms that are pushing ESG. I do think it is hypocritical. I think that pretty much everything BlackRock does is a net negative to society. I wish that they weren't as huge as they are, and I wish that there were a way to stop them and slow them down. However, there's not, and I think the only improper approach is to try to push states to do this. Let's see here. What have we got here with Vanguard? Oh, I noticed this, and I think this has to do with Texas, so let's read this one, at least in passing. Investment giant Vanguard pulls out of net zero ESG initiative. The company faces growing pressure from Republicans over environmental focus. If I have to say the words that comprise ESG one more time, I'm just kidding. It's okay. Vanguard is pulling out of a major investment industry initiative on tackling climate change in order to show that it acts independently and to provide clarity on its views to investors, the world's top mutual fund manager said Wednesday. Top investors such as Pennsylvania-based Vanguard have faced growing pressure from Republican U.S. politicians over their use of ESG factors in picking and managing securities, which performs really, really poorly. And this is what Scott Adams was talking about. He was saying that people writ large do not really approve of ESG because it just doesn't work well. They perform less than they're supposed to. Vanguard said the change will not affect our commitment to helping our investors navigate the risks that climate change can pose to their long-term returns. So what is happening here is Vanguard is noticing that this is a really bad idea, and they're trying to pull out of it carefully, delicately, without seeming like they're being hypocritical or going back on their word. We know the truth, and I hope that this continues. I hope that BlackRock faces the same fate. Honestly, I wish them all out. I wish that they would all just get away from this net zero ESG stuff and focus on what actually matters, on making people's lives better, on pushing actual policies that promote actual solutions like nuclear. No one ever talks about nuclear energy anymore, and I view that as a huge issue because this is one of the things that brings us closer to actual sustainable environmental policies that work well for people and work well for preserving the condition of the planet. Because I have kind of a weird theory about how conservatives should view environmentalism, because I've always thought, you guys know I was raised in a religious background. I've always thought that we have a sincere obligation to protect the world we live in, because if, as my parents taught me and my fellow siblings, God did create the world for humans to use and enjoy and make good use of. We have a duty to protect our environment around us, to make sure that it's clean and neat, to be responsible for it, and to take care of the animals around us who can give us nothing in return, because they are very important components to I'm having such a hard time recalling words this evening. I apologize, guys. The ladder where things eat other things. You know, how frogs eat bugs and how birds eat frogs and all this other stuff. It's very important to make sure that you preserve that, because especially if you are religious, especially if you are conservative, it's easy to understand that we have a responsibility to take good care of the things that we have. It's not a far reach. It's always kind of surprised me that conservatives hate this idea, but I do know, you can tell 100% this has been co-opted by Marxism and by this anti-human push to try to get humanity basically to zero so that the world can thrive. They see that as really the only option, and they're wrong. They're just wrong. And I think that the more states slap them around like this, the better they'll be, and the more they'll start to realize this. Because at the end of the day, they are companies that want to make money, and I respect it. That's fine. They need to focus on that instead of trying to change cultural dialogue around environmental, social governance nonsense. And then finally, let's look at what the New York Times thinks about ESG. One of the hottest trends in the world of investing is a sham, from September 2022. By Hans Taparia. Ooh, that sounds delicious. It sounds like tapas. Mr. Taparia is a clinical associate professor at New York University Stern School's business and a former entrepreneur. Good for him. Wall Street has been hard at work on a rebrand. Gone is the greed is good swagger that embodied its culture in the 1980s. Greed is good. Greed and good may best summarize its messaging today as it seeks to combine high profits with lofty intentions. I like that. To prosper over time, Lawrence D. Fink, Larry Fink, the founder and chief executive of the investment giant BlackRock, wrote in a remarkable public letter in 2018, every company must not only deliver financial performance, but also show how it makes a positive contribution to society. Intriguing. So they were kind of gauging which way the wind was blowing, trying to figure out how they could stay in the public's good graces and also make money and pretend that they cared about the environment. And they came up with ESGs. At the heart of this rebranding is a new industry of funds created by BlackRock and peers such as Vanguard and Fidelity that purport to invest in companies that are good corporate citizens. That is, companies that meet certain environmental, social, and governance criteria. These ESG criteria are a wide-ranging pertaining to issues such as carbon emissions, pollution, data security, employment practices, and the diversity of corporate board members. Yeah, so there's your DEI. On the face of it, ESG investment could be transformative, which is why it's one of the hottest trends in the world of investment. After all, allocating more capital to companies that do good helps them grow faster and lower their cost of capital, creating an incentive for all companies to be more socially and environmentally conscious. But the reality is less inspiring. Wall Street's current system for ESG investing is designed almost entirely to maximize shareholder returns, falsely leading many investors to believe their portfolios are doing good for the world. Exactly. This is false advertising for sure. For ESG investing to achieve its potential, Wall Street players will have to change their system. More likely, the Securities and Exchange Commission will have to change it for them. Perhaps the biggest problem is the ratings industry. To construct ESG funds, investment managers rely on rating agencies like Sustainalytics, S&P, and MSCI. So we talked about S&P earlier, how they were not unbiased in their ratings. Totally unfair. That create indexes grouping sets of companies that are meant to be good corporate citizens. Some examples are the Dow Jones Sustainability World Index and the MSCI ESG Universal Indexes. Wow, there's just a bunch of acronyms here. These agencies also rate companies on ESG criteria and sell the ratings to investment firms. But contrary to the spirit of ESG investing, and likely unknown to most investors, leading rating agencies are not scoring companies on their degree of environmental or social responsibility. Instead, they're measuring how much potential harm ESG factors like carbon emissions have on companies' financial performance. Interesting. So they are being hypocritical. Well, at the end of the day, we understand that they really are just businesses trying to make money. So that doesn't really surprise me. So let's see what he concludes. Paradoxically, some on the political right have started citing ESG investing as an example of woke capitalism, a marriage of progressive causes with a corporate power. That's correct. That's because that's what it is. Thank you. But the current system for ESG investing is just regular capitalism at its slickest. Ingenious marketing in the service of profits. The current system needs an overhaul. Reform may not be as kind to corporate America, but it would make it easier to invest in the future of our society and plan. Okay, so this guy has kind of an interesting take. He doesn't want the right wing to get one up on the investors in this one, and he doesn't want them to make fun of ESG, but at the same time, he's like, this definitely needs a reform. This isn't working the way it is. So I would like to leave you guys on a positive note, but what it feels like to me with this is that they're just going to slightly revise their recipe for how they're going to make this work and come back and make it a little more subtle so that like West Virginia doesn't realize what they're doing, so that Texas doesn't subpoena them, and so that, Florida doesn't take their $2 billion and run. And I don't view that as a good thing, but I will tell you right now, I think probably the biggest takeaway here is that your state elections matter. The reason that these people are being held to account right now for their ESG scam is because you have state treasurers, I think especially, you probably have attorney generals, all of these state officials are making this happen. This is not at the federal level. You don't need to feel overwhelmed. You don't need to feel frustrated as such by the Biden administration in this regard. I'm going to qualify that a little bit because it is frustrating to see. I think that what we need to do is to focus on the ground level. We need to go to the grassroots and keep in mind that we absolutely must focus on our home situation. We need to look at our state. We need to see where we can make a difference. My mom used to run the caucuses in Colorado. She used to help organize some of that stuff and make that happen. At the time, I thought it was extremely boring. I was like, Mom, this isn't a big deal. You should be more focused on like the federal government, the president, and all this stuff. And she was like, nope, this is where it starts. It starts at home. It starts close to where you are. And it starts with you going out, volunteering, and trying to make a difference right where you and your neighbors live. And it turns out she was totally right about that. And that's exactly what we're seeing with this ESG nonsense. The states that are making a difference are doing so because regular people got out and voted for good state treasurers, all of these, assistant, deputy, secretary, whatnot, attorney generals, all of these state officials. And they are who is they're the people who are making this happen. So I think it's super optimistic. I'm very excited to see where this goes, but I will end on a bit of a warning that I think this might just result in a bit of a retooling by the left to try to make this more agreeable to more people. But we will see what happens. I can't help feeling optimistic. I like the idea of individual states taking this on, tackling this, right from the beginning, and making sure that they hold these companies accountable, because no one else is doing it. The federal government is not going to do this. I know you guys have all heard the term, no one is coming to save you. And I think that is certainly true here. You cannot look to the feds to make this work for you. You have to go and vote and be involved in your community. You cannot give up. You can't say stuff like, oh, voting doesn't make a difference. It doesn't matter one way or the other. This is undemocratic. All the elections are rigged, whatever. Don't say that. Don't give up. Don't quit. The Democrats are using all of these tools to their end goals. And if you give up, you are giving them all of that power. And I really don't think that's the direction that we want to go in. If you actually want to stop some of the problems that they're causing, we need to act. We can't just lie down and die. And this is something that Carrie Lake was talking about with Steven Crowder earlier today. He was talking about some of the exhaustion. He said some quote about how all men are exhausted over time. And she's like, well, I'm not a man, I'm a woman, and I'm not tired. And good for her, honestly. I really hope that she gets to the bottom of what went down in Arizona. I think that's 100% necessary. I think that Carrie Lake really has a case in Arizona, and I'm so curious what happens there. But anyway, big things happening on the ESG front. Definitely stay tuned. Keep your eyes open. You're more than welcome to tweet at me with news articles about it. I just was really inspired by what's going on there, and I really didn't want to talk about Brittany Griner and all of that depressing stuff. And we've been talking about Twitter and Elon Musk way too much, even though he does everything that's interesting. Let's see what you guys are saying. I'm actually going to look at my chat tonight. I'm sorry. I see I have a light chat, and that's fine. That'll be easy to address everybody. Hopefully I can. Okay. Hi. Finally got a notification that you're live. I am, in fact, live. I'm very glad that you were able to see me. Merchant of Death. That's who it was. So the guy that we exchanged for Brittany Griner was a man who came by the not uninteresting title, the Merchant of Death. He did a ton of gun smuggling. He did a lot of gun running. He smuggled the biggest weapons, like insane weapons. So many AK-47s, so many, I think he smuggled military planes and this kind of thing. It was crazy, but this is who he chose to trade for a WNBA player, and it's just distressing. Somebody says, he was my congressman. If your congressman was Adam Schiff, I am so sorry. Hell Saint 28 says, I'm your biggest fan. I don't think that's true. I'm willing to bet that's probably my husband, Andy. Hi, Andy. How's it going? I know he's over there. He's listening to me talk. I said, you're my biggest fan, babe. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Everyone's telling me it's a food chain. I'm like, it's like the ladder where things eat other things. You know what I'm talking about. It's like a chain of food. Oh my gosh. My word recall is not great. So I appreciate you guys bearing with me for sure. We are stewards of the planet, so we need to treat it well, but not at the expense of human lives. Exactly. That's a great point. I suspect what's going on with all of this green energy stuff, all of this environmentally conscious, eco-friendly BS, is they are prioritizing the world in which humans live, the planet on which we thrive. They are prioritizing that over the people who actually live on it. And I will never understand why we would try to take better care of the planet than we do of the people that live on it. Because I stumbled across an article from 2017 talking about how much Canada is going to save with their assisted suicide BS. And it's something like millions of dollars. Incredibly depressing. I suspected that was the case all along. Oh, we have a super chat. Let's see here. Did you see the video they took of the exchange, and they cut out the point where Britt and the gun guy shook hands? Interesting. I'm going to have to check that out for sure. Thank you, Soundwave TM3. Appreciate that. He's my moderator. He'll put you in timeout if you're bad in the chat. The tides have started turning on stuff like ESG. Thank God. I hope you're right. But I will tell you right now that I suspect they'll just come back a little stronger and a little sneakier, and they'll slide it in without your knowledge or consent in the creepiest kind of innuendo way that I really don't like. But I'm afraid we can look forward to that. So keep your eyes peeled for that for sure, because this is something they are committed to doing. All right, I'm glad DeSantis is actually doing something to fight back. DeSantis is our single biggest, best Republican governor. Even Kristi Noem initially wanted to push through these lockdowns before the legislation told her no. And she was not strong enough on female sports. So I think that Ron DeSantis is truly where it's at. I'm hopeful that he can actually make hay with that. We'll see what happens. Nice bookshelf. These are all Andy's books. I've not read a single one of these books. There's a lot of programming stuff in here. I can't read this one. The regulatory, what? No. Magic universe. I don't know what I'm looking at over here. Yeah. The singularity is near, that one. I see that book all the time and I'm like, is it really? I should probably read this book and find out. But I haven't yet. There's a lot here. Andy loves to collect books. It's kind of dangerous. Said it was the difference in 2020 more easy to see. Every gun and bullet he ever sells, if he gets... Oh, that's the other thing that people were saying that I will mention in passing for sure. Every single argument against guns, against private gun ownership is officially out the window because we just released the world's biggest arms dealer out back into the wild in exchange for a WNBA player. I will not stop hammering this home because no one watches WNBA players. No one cares. She should have known the rules of the country that she was going to. She should have known how they respond to people who break those rules. The reality is that if you break the law in a country that you're visiting, you are responsible for what happens to you. You need to know what the expectations are when you go somewhere, honestly. Anyway, I digress. Thank you guys all very much for joining me this evening. Thank you, Soundwave TM3, for modding for me. I appreciate that. Thank you, Andy, for being my biggest fan. And thank you all for engaging. What's this? Engineer of all trades says Elon is the only reason I go on Twitter every day. There is a new epic story. I know. It's amazing. It's true. That man knows how to market. He is the marketing department for Starlink, for Tesla, for Twitter now. He knows what's up and he really likes to engage with normal people. He's responded to me like 4 different times now, and I'm functionally nobody on Twitter. I don't have that many followers, so I'm always super impressed. My mentions are always a hot mess whenever that happens because there's just a bunch of people screaming at Elon Musk for some reason. The carbon they want to eliminate is us. I have heard it said that the carbon they want to reduce is you, 100%, and I am fully inclined to agree, and that's disturbing. I think that the anti-human wing of the anti-human party is really taking over in a big way, and we all need to come to terms with the fact that human life actually is intrinsically valuable and worth defending. And this is something I was talking about with the Canadian assisted suicide stuff, and I just was like, we need to come to terms with what we actually think of humans, because our attitude toward abortion has bled over into our treatment of people who... I also saw an article today about Canadian parents requesting medically assisted suicide for babies. And I was just... It takes a lot to flummox me because I'm online constantly. I'm reading the news constantly. I've been engaging with this stuff since I was like 10 years old. But that's a problem. I have a serious issue with that. And I think that if that is the way we're going to go, I've been thinking a lot about the sweet meteor of death lately, honestly, because I don't know. I wish that there were a better, simpler, easier solution, but it's going to be a lot of hard work. These are the hard times that are going to make good people. So I will leave you on that hopefully slightly more optimistic note, and I will close it here. I will see all of you guys same time, same place tomorrow, Friday night. Hopefully some of you can carve out time to hang out with me. And until then,